if students have not mastered a skill, we should not have them working independently. These are students that are still going to be working with us, or they could work with a peer, but definitely not independently. And things like this are things that decrease the frustration level for students and make them more successful.
Welcome to the Cross Cultural Psych Podcast with Professor Paul Youngmin Kim. This podcast features conversations on the intersection of psychology, culture, and faith with renowned scholars in psychology and related fields. And now, here is Dr. Paul Youngmin Kim.
Dr. Preciado joined the School of Education at Seattle Pacific University in 2010. He teaches courses in special education and teacher education at both the undergraduate and graduate level. Dr. Preciado's research specializes in literacy development with a focus on Latino English learners and struggling readers among elementary school-age students. Moreover, his research includes decreasing problem behaviors and increasing academic engagement and social skills competence among Latino English learners. Dr. Preciado received his Ph.D. in special education with an emphasis in positive behavioral intervention supports and literacy from the University of Oregon. Jorge, it's good to have you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate it. Appreciate this opportunity.
Appreciate you being on. And I know that over the years, we've talked quite a bit about our mutual interests in multicultural education and related ideas. I recently ran across this article that you wrote with School of Education colleagues at SPU, and it's titled Achieving Positive Classroom Experiences for Latino K-5 Students. I was struck when I read the article by the specific educational tools that were described. And I think one example was the Elkonin boxes. And these were intriguing to me, but also unfamiliar to me. And I think my listeners will benefit from these very concrete tools that they can use within the classroom. I'm curious if you could walk through one of these approaches.
Sure. Yes, Paul. Thank you. Well, first off, thank you for reading the article. Obviously, the intent for that particular article is manifold. One, it's our opportunity to sort of share our thoughts with our peers in the field. But more importantly, Paul, it was targeting practitioners, in this case, elementary school teachers. And we all know what a difficult job that is. And nothing like being part of the team, if you will, and laying out for them what are some research-based, evidence-based practices that can not only make their job a bit easier, but align with what they're trying to do. I mean, basically, they're trying to increase academic outcomes for their students. Also, a little bit more background knowledge. So when the pandemic hit, I knew that it was not going to be good for education, and in particularly for certain groups within education. What we ended up getting, at least like that first year, the fact that there was even instruction going on, I would say is a big deal, given the severity of this situation. Anyway, our students then sort of got this online instruction that was in much cases abbreviated. And so one of the things that I was sad about was the fact that, to begin with, Paul, we have low literacy rates in our country, which is very interesting. I mean, given the superpower, we are, but yet such low literacy rates among our citizens. It's very interesting. That has always, even when I was a classroom teacher, that was always something that interests me. So going back then to this particular article, the particular article focused on Latino students and focused on what are some things that could help Latino students achieve in school settings. And one of them has to do with just the fact, just our literacy instruction. And how can we improve our literacy instruction? Obviously, literacy is a very complex, it's a complex subject. But at the early ages, when students are first learning how to read, Alconin boxes come in nicely because Alconin boxes really solidify a particular skill that's called phonemic awareness.
Mm,
Phonemic awareness is a skill, it's sort of a foundational piece to what we call the alphabetic principle, which is so being able to decode a word. There's actually a precursor to that, which is phonemic awareness skills, where
mhm,
the students are getting opportunities to understand that, say, let's take the word hat, that the word hat is made up of three sounds.
mhm,
And the Alconin boxes do a nice way of isolating that because for each sound, the teachers then can put a chip on,
mm,
say, it sort of looks like, remember when we used to play hopscotch,
mhm,
those squares? So that's what an Alconin box looks like. And then you can just put a chip inside each square
mm.
to represent the particular sound.
Wow.
And so what's nice about that is that the students do not necessarily need to see the word hat.
Mm,
For in a lot of cases, they're not there yet. But this is a precursor to understanding that in the word hat, we have three sounds.
mm,
And those sounds are at. And so as you can imagine, taking a 5-year-old
right.
and who are very excited about reading, but do not have the slightest clue how to begin
Mhm,
that journey. So it is important then that we equip our teachers.
right.
And this is, again, just one particular skill. I also like to, when I speak to educators, also emphasize the importance of orthography.
Mm,
And we can use orthography spelling as also phonemic awareness skill because
mm,
along the ways we can also turn that around with the example with hat. All right, let me tell you the sounds in this word, and I'd like for you to write to this word for me.
mm,
And the educator can say, all right, are you ready? Here's the word. Ah, right, write it down. What sounds do you hear?
mm,
So it is about engagement, it is about participation,
mhm,
but it's also about teachers knowing what they're doing and deliberately teaching these precursor skills
mhm,
because there's definitely a lot of these are foundational pieces.
mhm,
And so in many classrooms, Paul, and even right now as you and I are speaking, there's definitely a lot of magical moments that are occurring.
mm,
There's a lot of light bulbs that are going on at this moment, and there's a lot of high fives that are going on at this moment. But also, the reality is that there's also a lot of frustration going on as well. Teachers either not feeling supported or not necessarily having a strong understanding of
mhm.
what are the components what are the necessary skills that we need in order to help students become competent readers.
Wow. I'm already jotting things down and hearing certain phrases for the first time, or maybe used in a different context, like the phonemic awareness, all these things. So thank you, Jorge, for sharing. Am I hearing correctly then? These are not only skills that teachers can use, but also teachers can teach, for instance, family members to use in their homes? Or is it only something that's reserved for the classroom?
Mhm. No, great question. Not at all. This
Mm,
is definitely open access.
yeah.
And if anything, we even, Paul, are encouraging our early childhood teachers
Mm,
to start this process because this is not necessarily something that we should wait until the students are in kindergarten.
mm,
Preschool is an excellent age. Even, parents, obviously, we know that parents spend a lot of time with their children. But luckily we have this thing where when we are driving our young children to places, they have to be buckled up and they are in these car seats.
mm.
Those are a great opportunity, especially when we are at a stoplight.
Yeah.
Great opportunities. And it doesn't have to be that you annoy the child for the whole hour
Yeah.
just doing this. But you can definitely do phonemic awareness activities in the car. 5 to
Mm,
10 minutes would be fine.
yeah.
And you practice this skill. And obviously there's also, another thing that's important in teaching, Paul, is understanding how do we present information. And one of the things that's very beneficial is always presenting information in a very sequential manner,
Mm,
and usually from easiest to most complex. So if I'm a parent, which I am, but no longer of children that have to be in a car seat,
right.
but when they were in a car seat, when we would be at a stop sign, I would say something like, okay, Pablo, what is this word? What is that word? Stop. And he would think, and then he would say stop. At first, you probably have to provide a few examples of
Hmm.
what we're doing, and we can turn this into a game.
Yeah.
After a while, they catch on, and you give them you don't tell them what the word is. You just here's a word. Here are the
Mm,
sounds. What is the word?
mhm, mhm,
And so that is a much easier way than having him, okay, Pablo, here's the word. The word is stop. Tell me the last sound that you hear in the word stop. That
mm.
is a little bit more complex, but we're still dealing with a phonemic awareness skill.
Right,
So
right.
we always start with the easiest.
Yeah.
As soon as they're grasping things, then we make it more complex for them.
Mm,
And it's amazing. Also, the bathtub during bath time.
mm,
Those are also great ways. They're right there. They can't move
mhm,
during
mhm,
bath time. And so it's these are all great opportunities to practice letters, practice letter sounds,
mhm,
engage in phonemic awareness skills. And as their skills are getting better, if you get those little magnetic letters
mm.
stick to the tub, then now you can start putting like CVC words, CVCC words, and they can actually start decoding words.
I love this because you are translating your research, your theories into what it might look like within the home. And you're right, those opportunities where kids are buckled into their car seat or when in the bathtub taking a bath,
Mhm.
um, in some ways they're not going anywhere at that time.
Not
And
going
so
anywhere.
to be able
Yeah,
to take advantage of that as a parent
absolutely.
and use that time for these kinds of lessons, that sounds really promising. So thanks for sharing those tips.
Sure.
In the article, there's also some parts where you talk about managing the classroom, which I mean, we deal with this at the college level, but I imagine at the elementary level, well, I don't have to imagine because as you know, my wife is a fifth grade teacher. And
Oh,
so I hear stories
right.
about how
Yeah,
challenging this might be. And
yeah,
so in that section, you talk about behavioral contracts and using that
yeah,
effectively. I think I have a sense of what that is, but I'm curious as an educator, how you might
sure,
implement this as
sure.
something that's under culturally responsive teaching instead of
Yeah,
it being kind of punitive or
sure.
like transactional. Yeah.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. One, we should always view the teaching of social skills and behavior. We should always view that and teach that with the same rigor as we
Mm,
teach academics.
mm,
Usually, for whatever reason, the social skills or the behavior sort of take a backseat because the reading, writing, and spelling, and that is like that's why you come to school.
right.
And I'm not going to negate that. I mean, those are very, very important skills, and that we need to do that. But the social skills are also very important
Mm,
because students can also learn how to self-manage their behavior. And think about it, a self-management, the wonders that self-management has, because it helps you to self-regulate behaviors. And when you're self-regulating, you can make better choices. In the case here of the behavioral contracts, it's more of, and I'll lay out to you what would lead to that behavior contract. But basically, the behavior contract is what it is. It's just a contract
mm,
where the teacher and the student are in communion in some way, saying that yes, we agree to these things, and these are some of the things that I'm going to do. To begin with, as let's talk about what are some things that can be done in the classroom that can support
mm,
that the contract is acknowledged and is followed through. So one of the things that is definitely critical in an elementary school setting, and I would also say all the way up to a college setting as well, it is important for teachers to tell the students what are the expectations and routines in our classroom. So what is it that I am expecting of you while when you are here with me or when we are together? This is what I expect. Because if you think about it, the students kind of know, but they don't know exactly
Right.
what is on your mind. What is it that you exactly want? And so I encourage teachers to be brave in some ways and just say, yeah, well, this is what I expect from you. In school settings, we also have something that's called positive behavior instructional supports,
Mm,
which is we know that we can get a lot more out of the students if we actually teach the skills and then reinforce those skills
right.
instead of going the approach of, say, positive punishment,
Mm,
where we're not necessarily teaching any new skill, but we're just punishing the inappropriate behaviors. So nothing like teaching the skills, reinforcing the skills. And so we spend quite a bit of time in that. But the nice part is that those skills should, those rules, those classroom rules should be linked
mm,
to the school-wide rules.
right.
And usually the school-wide rules, anywhere between 3 to 5 positively stated rules, usually be safe, be responsible, be respectful. It turns out that those are the same rules in all of the classroom settings
Mm-hmm,
within
mm-hmm,
that school. All the students know about the rules: be safe, be responsible, be respectful. The teachers teach what that looks like in the classroom setting in different contexts too.
mm-hmm,
What does be safe and be responsible look like if we are on the carpet? What does be safe, be responsible, be respectful look like when we're lining up to go, say, to the recess area? What does be safe, be responsible, be respectful look like in the hallways?
mm-hmm,
What does be safe, be responsible, be respectful look like in class, in the bathrooms, and
mm,
also in the gymnasium, in the auditorium where students read? Anyway, we're going to use all of this proactive approach again, all of this teaching. And if we're finding that a student needs just a little bit more of a nudge, then we could
mm,
also opt for the contract. But the contract has laid out a lot of the things that we are already doing.
mm,
Another thing to always consider is the academics as well. We do know that some students, because the academic tasks are just too difficult for them, they're going to act out and they're going to choose something that's going to be more reinforcing.
mm, mm,
So to minimize these what behaviors called escape, maintain, problem behaviors, then we make adjustments to the academic needs to the student. Maybe we do some more small group instruction.
mm,
Maybe we provide more direct instruction, more instruction that is more sequential, easiest to, because it's obvious that the student does not have the academic skills, but
mm,
we're just not going to leave the student there.
mm,
And the student needs support academically as well as needs to learn appropriate social skills because those are going to be important. You know, there's a direct link, as you know, between the social skills, behavior of individuals and how they are viewed by others and their
mm-hmm.
connection with others. Having good social skills is important, especially at that age
Yeah,
where your inappropriate behaviors can quickly get you excluded.
right. I'm struck by two things that you said. One is this idea that social skills, learning of social skills, good interpersonal skills in the classroom is just as important as learning math, as just as important as learning history, learning English in the classroom.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
I I totally agree, of course, as a psychologist that with that perspective. And I also can sense maybe many families, like I'm thinking about the public school that my children are part of, where may in theory agree to that, but if we implement that in practice, might kind of push back because they're so focused on academics. But how important then it is for us as educators, as you as a scholar of education to provide that input continuously that, you know what, academics are important, but so are social skills. And then the second thing you said about behavioral contracts being almost like an individualized plan. And when I think of it that way, where oh, with this student, like this aspect might be emphasized on the contract,
Yeah,
whereas with the other student, a different
right.
aspect. It
That's
seems
true.
very, very humanizing, right? Like
Exactly.
person-centered approach, which
Exactly.
helps me sort of understand that accurately, as opposed to
Mm.
having it be a very mechanistic kind of a catch-all thing.
Yeah, no, rightly so. And you know, you bring up a good point. Some parents may think, well, but my child is already behaving well, or why do we need to spend time on this? You know, it's always good to front load stuff at the beginning, and then
Mm,
you sort of just, it's more maintenance as we're going along. And another thing too, it's not as if we have to necessarily teach this as like a separate curriculum.
right.
We can see appropriate behaviors every day taking place, and the
Mm,
teacher, all the teacher has to do is just walk around and say things like, Miriam, thank you, nice job providing a pencil to your friend who needed
mm,
one. There you go. You're walking around. Julio, nice job being seated. You're paying attention. You're attentive as people in your group are speaking to you. Excellent job. Keep it up.
mm, mm,
So those are the kinds of things that, we're walking around, and we should actually reinforce
mhm.
and be very specific. As you know, we could say, "Hey, good job, Julio," but Julio could say, "Oh, but good job for what? What did I
Right,
do?"
right.
We want to be specific as to that, and it doesn't take very much
Mm,
of our time. I mean, the
yeah,
students are working.
right,
What we're
right.
doing is we're just walking around, and not only are we reinforcing the academic side because they
Hmm.
may have some questions, but we should also be thinking as an educator, there's also that social skill side too, that students need reinforcement also.
Yeah, I totally agree that it doesn't take away much time from the classroom, if at all. I also see how teachers need intentionality in being able to do that, right? They need to have that sense of, oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to pay extra attention to my students, and not only in terms of like them doing their math problem, but
Right.
also like what are they
Yeah.
doing interpersonally? And
Yes.
so, yes, I agree. It doesn't take away from class time, but it does require that extra training and extra intentionality on the part of the
Yeah.
educator. Yeah.
Intentionality. And then
Mm.
I would say the other part would be think about what that does towards building community within
Yeah.
our classroom setting.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's one of the things we're trying to do. I mean, even though we're looking at, yeah, I want you to learn math, and I want you to learn history,
Mm.
and these wonderful things that you're going to learn in class. But wouldn't it also be great if we can do this in community as well?
Yeah.
And there's a sense that the students feel supported.
Mm.
They know that this our teacher is fair, and our teacher has the best intentions for us. And
Yeah.
it shows because of the interactions that he or she has with us on a daily basis.
Mhm. That community is so important. We'll come back to it. I also wanted to ask, among the wonderful classes that you teach at SPU, which one do you enjoy teaching the most and why? I know that
Yeah,
maybe there are a few
yeah,
that you enjoy, but if you could pick one, which
sure,
one would that
sure.
be?
Yeah, definitely. That was probably the question that had me thinking the most. They were all good questions. I would have to say, so first off, let's see, I teach courses in assessment. I also teach courses in individualized education programs, which is the IEP.
Mm,
I also teach courses on specific learning disabilities. I also teach courses on diversity, equity, and
mhm,
inclusion.
mm.
I also teach courses on literacy, and I
Wow.
also teach courses on behavior management. I would say that I will pick one. I would
Mm,
say first off that I love all of those
yeah,
courses because they're just so wonderful topics, and
right.
they just fit in very nicely with what happens in a classroom setting. I would probably have to say Paul will be the
Mm,
literacy courses. I teach both at the undergraduate and at the graduate level. I I try as much as I can to really be realistic with our pre-service teachers
mm,
and also service teachers, in the sense that it's not going to be easy and it's not going to be a quick fix. But if we start thinking about things along in a very systemic way,
mm,
that we can definitely accomplish things. And at the end of the day, it's amazing how really the schools that are doing a really good job with their literacy outcomes for students is very much systemic. It's
mm,
very much a culture within the school. It's very much using very good assessments, assessing students, looking at the assessments, making modifications to the instruction, and probably above all, really having competent educators as far as what what do they need to know in
mm,
order to be able to teach someone how to read?
mm,
And so those are things that, Paul, I basically have no problem getting up in the morning because I feel like I am a part of a team.
mm,
It's like a huge team. And I know that my days, at least for right now, I'm no longer in a classroom being the practitioner implementing these, but I feel that I can still be a part of
right.
that, and through research, through presentations,
Mhm.
even just encouragement,
Yeah.
sometimes, or affirmations to our colleagues.
Mhm.
And I just know how difficult it is. And also, I know that that's each child walks into a school setting with that goal.
Mm, mm,
I don't know of any child that says, "Oh no, I don't care if I ever learn how to read."
mm.
I don't know. I have not met any child that thinks that way, nor have I met a teacher that thinks that way.
Right, right. Yeah. That's powerful. Thanks for sharing about that course that you enjoy. I know, again, it was not easy to pick that. Just to go a little bit deeper into that, as you well know, we teach at a university that is intentionally a Christian university. And I know you, Jorge, to be a man of deep faith. Are there ways that you integrate your Christian faith into, for instance, how you teach students to teach?
Yeah,
Exercises, perspectives, things you do in the classroom that you're willing to share with the listeners. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. No, that's another great question. Yeah, Paul, one of the things that I have had to learn
Mm,
is that I don't know what are the things that give you tunnel vision,
mm,
but one of the things that often gives me tunnel vision is when I walk into the classroom
mm,
and thinking, and because I already planned what is going to be taking place that day. But I'm oftentimes strictly looking at this from the academic side, Paul. Sometimes I have to remind myself, okay, so then what about spiritually? How does this play? I I've been back and forth where sometimes I open with a prayer or we
mm,
do prayers. But
mm,
I know one thing where I have been constant. And one of the things that even though we are working now with college students, but college students are still individuals. One of the things I would say that comes across sort of like who I am as a Christian is just in my humanity and in how I teach and try to instill in them
mm,
that when we teach, we should always teach in a way that's humane,
mm,
that really dignifies the students, and that when they are going to be in the classroom setting, we're gonna run the gamut. We're gonna have some students that are in gifted programs.
mm,
You're gonna have some like quite a bit of students that are doing very good work in class. And then you're also gonna have some students that are really struggling.
right.
And so with the students that are really struggling, instead of putting it on them, that, well, you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to do better in this and that, we need to turn that thought around and say, well, what is it that I'm doing that is not necessarily has not reached this particular student at this
Mm,
time?
mm,
And so really having some honest conversations with ourselves and really thinking about, so when we do have students that struggle, some of the things that are more successful than others are things like we should have more small group instruction.
mm,
Students that are struggling really benefit from small group instruction because they get more opportunities to practice skills and they get more opportunities to respond from
mhm,
questions that we are asking them.
mm,
If students have not mastered a skill, we should not have them working independently. These are students that are still going to be working with us, or they could work with a peer, but definitely not independently. And things like this are things that decrease the frustration level for students and make
mhm,
them more successful. One of the things also that I like to tell the students as they're leaving for the day after class
mhm,
is over is I remind them about how important it is to structure your day for success.
mm,
And so in this particular case, I think also for our educators, how do we structure our day for success?
Mm,
And then particularly for the students that are needing more support, because that's basically how I interpret it. You show me somebody that has poor literacy skills, or you show me somebody that has poor social skills, and I'm always thinking, well, that person needs more support.
mm,
And so they need more help in those areas. And
right.
so I think we also need to be in that mind frame and
Mm,
not get angry or upset about that, but just interpret that as, well, that's a person that just needs more help.
right.
There's so much to learn and we don't know everything. We also find ourselves in situations where
Yeah.
I need more help in
Yeah.
this area because I really don't understand what's going on.
It's a very humbling experience, those
Yeah,
moments, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they happen.
That's right.
They
I
happen.
really liked your use of the word humane to describe sort of your connection to your approach to connecting your faith and how you teach, and to really deeply respect and recognize God's image in the other person. And even that idea of not pointing the finger at the student, but looking back at myself and thinking about what can I do better is very consistent with the biblical call to consider other people more significant, more important than yourself. And so I deeply resonated with what you shared. Maybe going a little bit deeper,
Yeah,
if you're comfortable sharing, Jorge,
yeah, absolutely.
you mentioned literacy as one area of interest, but also special education
Yeah,
as another area of interest. And
yeah,
when you think about your specific interest in education,
yeah,
how did your faith background play a role, if at all? Like
yeah,
as a Christian scholar,
sure.
as a Christian person,
Yeah,
how did
yeah,
that sort of motivate you to get into these areas? Yeah.
yeah. No, that's a great question. Right from the get-go, Paul, I always felt an attraction to people,
Mm,
like a connection to people. Basically, I loved everything about life. I remember even when I was a child, I just loved everything. The fact that we had trees, the
mm,
fact that we had freeways, the
mm,
fact that we had a bridge that we can go over the freeway.
yeah.
I used to live to get to school. I had to pass an overpass, and it was a bridge, and it was actually, this is in San Diego, and it was the
Mm,
5 South and 5 North that would go
yes.
underneath this
Hmm.
bridge. And I would always be fascinated. And just the fact that, wow, this is so great that
Mm,
all these little things.
yeah.
I was born into a household with a very, very, very religious mother. My mother was very Catholic, and that's how she raised us.
Mm,
And so ever since I can remember, we did a lot of church and a lot of things and a lot of activities after church as well. But I would say that I was drawn into God and what He did for us, what He does for us, what He wants us to, what He wants, the goals He has for us. Those were never something that I doubted.
mm,
They resonated with me because I always saw God as something where He was just about love and about
mm,
patience and about nurturing and about teaching and all of those things. I always felt a lot better
mm,
when I did those things.
mm, mm,
And I wasn't somebody, because I always had this, I wanted to have a close relationship with God. Even though I had friends that would, when I was in elementary school, even though I had friends that would say bad words a lot, I never really did.
mm,
But the times that I did, would always feel bad. And I would
mm.
also sometimes find myself even apologizing to the person like the next day or so, or
Wow.
something, because I felt like I had disappointed
Mm,
God, and I definitely wanted to be on the side where I was helping others. I was doing what I felt I was called to do,
mm,
and not getting caught up with the minutia of, okay, well, someone said something this about you. Now you have to say something back to them because they
right.
hurt your feelings. I totally just hated that, Paul.
Mm,
And plus, it just didn't make me feel good. And I always knew that I always felt better
Right.
And it was about helping others, like helping a friend with their math work or walking with somebody, because sometimes they would get bullied by some
Mm,
kids, but if they felt like if they were with more kids, they were usually left alone. So,
right.
things like that. Those were the kinds of things that motivated me, and I was
Mm,
interested in doing those things, and I definitely wanted to stay on that plane and not so much where you have to be angry,
hmm.
or you have to be thinking about how do I get back at this person. I just didn't want to.
Right.
It just didn't resonate with me. It didn't
Mm,
feel good.
mm,
So I didn't want to be in that. And so I've always had felt a calling for that. In regards to special education, I have family members with special needs, and folks that I grew up with had siblings with special needs.
mm,
And for me, to be honest with you, growing up, it was really normal. When my cousins would come and we would play or do things together, like I said, I had a couple of cousins with disabilities.
mm,
And then I had friends that had their siblings that had some disabilities. And so I never really saw anything. I knew that there was just a different way. Maybe they needed a little bit more time to process a question. And
mm,
that didn't bother me. That did not bother me. Nor did I think that it was funny because if they had a stuttering problem, or if because
right.
they needed a little bit more time to process something.
Mm,
That was not enough to say, oh, I don't want to be your friend because you're weird.
mm,
That's just because, again, I didn't
yeah.
think that was not very nice. I think I've always have felt a connection with people, like I said,
Mm,
and individuals with disabilities have always been in my life. I would also say that it was also my experience as an adult. I actually my master's degree, Paul, was
hmm.
was a program that was taught fully by all special education faculty,
Wow.
but it was geared towards general education teachers. It was a program where they basically wanted to train general education teachers, give them the special education training, but you did not have to be a special education teacher.
Mm,
And I really gravitated to that, really and that sort of just seemed the cherry on top, Paul,
mm,
because of just going back and just looking at my experience. Plus, I also have a brother with learning disabilities, and so
mm,
it just seemed like
yeah.
the natural thing that this is something I saw. My brother struggled in school,
Mm,
and I figured, well, I am sure that there's other families experiencing the same things, and I want to see what I can do
yeah.
to to help out.
Mm,
There's a
mm,
lot of other people helping out.
yeah. Oh, this is really powerful. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story.
Sure.
And
You're
like you
welcome.
described, I'm struck by how there's such coherence between your personal experiences and including your personality, your character, and then how graduate school turned out for you. And so, yeah, I can see how God orchestrated those things to bring you
Amazing,
where you
man.
are today. Yeah.
It,
Hmm.
it, it really is amazing, Paul.
Mm,
I remember when I was in the teacher credential program, to be a general education teacher. I remember in one class, the professor asking, "So, where do you see yourself uh,
mm,
10 years from now, 20 years from now?" And I think, we were a pretty good group. We were about 30 students. I remember we were a very small group, those that kept their hand up when he said, and who wants to continue to be an elementary school teacher, like for their whole entire career. I was one of them.
oh,
With me, and then I think maybe another one or two. Everyone else was thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna then eventually be an administrator or eventually
mm,
in the district office." I don't know, someone else, they might have said college professor, but I never, that was not me. I,
mm,
I said, oh, I'm going to be in the classroom all my life. And
mm,
like you said, God works in different ways. And sometimes it's good. Just let him take you, and he'll take care of
mhm.
you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So powerful. I mean, I could listen to your testimony, your description of your life journey even longer. I have like three typical questions I ask all guests.
Yeah,
And maybe this next question will continue to connect what you're sharing with your response. But we're in Christian higher education, and many of my listeners are interested in Christian higher ed, or they're already in Christian higher education. And typically they might be like new faculty or an advanced graduate student thinking about Christian higher education. Given your time at SPU and your experience with Christian higher ed, if somebody was interested in it,
yeah,
what advice might you have?
yeah. No, that's great. I would say one, definitely be interested.
Mm,
This has been my first connection to ever either as a student. I mean, I was never in a religious school as a
yeah.
student. I was all public school.
Mm,
And also in my work, when I started working as an educator, it was public schools
mm,
and also a public university.
mm,
So I never even thought about a Christian. So number one, would that be take a look at Christian universities.
mm,
Number two, I would say the reason why they should take a look at that is because for the very first time, and this was very powerful for me,
mm,
that I actually got an opportunity to hear people talk about God,
mm,
which coming from the public schools, you never really hear people mention God.
mm,
And what I found so powerful about that is because in many ways this reminds us that there are gifts that were given to us and we should implement those,
mm,
but we should also be grateful for the gifts that we have.
mm,
And it is very powerful for me to
mm,
come to work and to be among amazing individuals
mm,
who also care about God and
mm,
basically they care about people.
mm,
There's a lot of folks doing some great work, but oftentimes what's missing from that conversation is what does God do for them in their
mm,
lives? And
mm,
sometimes because maybe they were not raised with a faith, that's basically sort of like maybe it's not that important,
mm, mm.
even though their work is very important. And I
Right.
would also say that their work is in many ways a manifestation of what God wants from
Mm-hmm,
us and
mm-hmm,
what he wants us to do. So for someone who is, say, just finishing their PhD or someone that is transitioning from
mm,
another university and they have never looked into a Christian I would say look into a Christian university. The that blend, especially if your faith is important to you, coming to work with people that share the same faith.
mm,
And in my case, I am surrounded by educators.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You are surrounded by other psychologists,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but that also have a faith. I can't complain. I cannot complain.
Mm,
And the other thing is that, and I don't know if this is true, but at least in our case, we get a chance to meet other folks and we can
mm,
actually collaborate with folks in different disciplines. And that
yeah.
is actually like one of the questions that you're asked, at least
Mm,
coming here. I'll be honest, Paul, it threw me off a bit because I had never heard of other, like the way it was presented, that you should really think about doing these collaborations and folks are open to that. I've
yeah.
also been very grateful, and the longer I've been here, the more and more people you meet,
Mm,
and it's just great. And I just basically I'm in awe
mm,
of the things that people do, and grateful too, because
yeah.
society needs all that good work.
No, thank you for that perspective. And I think that community of fellow academics who also love God and share in the same Christian faith, but also practice in various ways. It's not
Yeah,
like all of our colleagues are the same denomination. We
right.
have very diverse
Mhm.
representation of Christian traditions on our
Yes, we do.
campus, including Catholics,
Yeah,
including, yeah, traditions that are very diverse within the Christian background. And so, yeah, I totally resonate with that idea of same faith, but also very diverse practices, and that
Mhm.
community can be a very special one. Yeah. I know you said you don't like you have nothing to complain about, but instead of I don't mean complain, but like if you had an honest, sort of candid
Yeah,
critique of Christian higher ed,
yeah,
and I'm not just talking about our own institution, but
yeah,
just in your experience about like this is an area that we need to really grow in, maybe
yeah,
lament about
yeah,
or repent of.
yeah.
Like, are you comfortable sharing something that you might have
Sure,
observed? Yeah.
sure. I would say it's about the student experience.
Mm,
And I think that oftentimes folks want to put the onus on or the say, well, that's on administration.
mm,
I think it falls on all of us.
mm,
And in some way or along the lines, we as faculty, Paul, though we don't necessarily carry the monologue or the title administrator, I think in many ways we are leaders though.
mm, mm,
And I think our students need support,
mm,
and we should provide that level of support, whether it's support because they don't have a faith, but
mm.
they feel like they belong here,
Yeah.
or the fact that they are part of the LGBTQ plus community,
Mm,
feel that they also have a right to be here.
mm,
That those are the kinds of things then that we should take into consideration, and more than just taking into consideration, having the conversations and having this acknowledgement
right.
that you are welcome. And
Mm-hmm.
specifically, I think that for us, if we are going to say that we are a Christian university, we basically don't have any other choice, Paul, because God was very accepting of people.
Mm,
And if anything, he wanted he wanted to be with folks that needed more of his
mm-hmm.
guidance,
Mm-hmm.
love, and support
Mm-hmm.
at that time.
Mm,
And he was also modeling to us that yeah, you can hang out with other Christians if you want, but there's also other people in this world.
yeah.
And he did countless times
Mm,
see throughout his life. And then sometimes even himself putting himself in a situation where people may even start talking bad about him.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he had a bigger message. And I think that's probably something that we should remember, that there is a bigger message here. And at the
Yes.
end of the day, we should focus on that bigger message. And to me, the bigger message is love, respect, dignity, support.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is the bigger message.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was modeled to us. And I think we need to also model this to our younger students because time flies, Paul. I'm sure you remember your days as a college. I remember my days as a college
Mm-hmm.
student, but now we're on the other side now.
Yeah.
And these are young folks that are bright,
Mm-hmm.
strong, but these are also young folks that are also fragile in some ways. And so we definitely want to uplift them and support them.
Ah, this is so important. And I'm so glad, Jorge, that you are providing this as an area of growth for us. And also saying that we as faculty also are responsible. We can't just be admiring problems around us and saying, oh, you're responsible. But
True.
actually, we need to embrace our own accountability as well, and ultimately for the benefit of all of our students. I think Christian higher ed is, and you're not the first one to point this out, Jorge. It's interesting because on one hand, we're very clear in who we are, like Christian university. But then, like, at least for our institution, and we're not the only Christian higher ed doing this, but we're very wide open when it comes to the students that we welcome into our community. But the question then becomes like, how do we equally help their sense of belonging? How do we help
Sure.
all of our students belong into our
Absolutely.
community? And I think that's the
Absolutely.
everyday struggle that we have as faculty, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And Paul, communication is very, very important. And, you know, not that even us as faculty, even though we're trying to, as much as we can, honor our students and respect them, we're also not giving out grades, free grades. I mean, folks have to work for
Yeah.
them, right? But the important thing is that I think people expect that folks are clear with them.
Mm,
And then not just clear with them, but that they have a sense that somebody really does care about them.
right.
And I think that that's probably something that we always need to remember. Do our students feel that we care about them?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Something that, and sometimes they're probably going to say yes, or depending who we're speaking to, and some may say no.
Mm,
And if we're getting no's, then we need to look in a little bit closer as to why we're getting no's for that
yeah.
particular response.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder. My next question that I ask all guests is, can you describe one project that you're currently working on that most excites you?
All right. So I'm working on a manuscript right now,
Mm,
and as you probably figured out, it is on literacy.
mm,
And this time it's not necessarily bringing in, like the article that you mentioned earlier, helping Latino students achieve in the classroom setting. There were several different things going
mhm,
on there. We talked about literacy there. We talked about behavior management, and we also talked about some cultural
right.
competence going on. This one's more just strictly literacy
Mm,
and really getting at the phonological and morphological components of literacy, targeting Latino students.
mm,
And so I'm excited
mm,
about that project
mm.
and hoping to be done with that maybe by the summer.
Oh, wow.
And it'll then go out to journals,
Mm,
and hopefully someone will say, yes, we like it, we'll review it, and then we'll
yeah.
get back to you.
Okay.
So, I think that's kind of our job,
Mm,
that we, a lot of people use the word or the term not to be silent
mm,
nowadays. I think for us, this is in some ways also that we're not being silent.
mhm,
We're just trying to help the field. We're
yeah.
trying to help people that do
Mhm,
this, that do their work every day. And I know that I have been appreciative of all the people that have come into my life, some expectedly and some unexpectedly. As long as I'm still working as a college professor, this is what I'm going to continue to do.
yeah.
But once I retire, I will either work in a school setting as a volunteer, or Paul, volunteer somewhere which has totally nothing to do with education. But
Mm.
definitely volunteering is something that I just want to do because I'm going to have time.
I'm looking forward to that manuscript eventually coming out as a publication and looking forward to reading that. My last question is, or can be a fun one or can be a deep one, so you choose. But it's actually two parts. One is I ask my guests, without knowing who my next guest is, which I don't know off the top of my head,
Yeah.
what is a question that you might throw at them that you don't have to answer, right? All right. So
Okay.
it could be a
Okay.
really tough one. But then
Yeah.
my other part to the question is my last guest asked, what is the most important thing about your vocation? From your perspective, what's the most important thing about your
All right.
vocation?
All right. I'll answer the latter
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
then I'll answer the former.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I think the
Mm-hmm.
latter is a little bit easier. I would say the most important thing would be making sure, or I am a part of a team
Mm,
that tries very hard to send very knowledgeable, competent, caring individuals who
mm,
will carry on this legacy of education. And hopefully that we have equipped them with one,
mm,
enough knowledge that they can get their job done, but
mm,
also second, with enough knowledge that they are going to continue to think and eventually say, I'm thinking of some other things, and I think maybe graduate school will be something that will help me.
mm,
So the fact that we can encourage just continuing the education. I remember graduating with my BA and just being very happy about that. But life changes and
mm,
things come up, and also you grow as an individual and you
right.
change as a person. And 6 years after that, graduate school was my calling.
Yeah.
And so going back to your question, then I get a lot of satisfaction. I'm very happy for them. I also know that it is not going to be an easy job.
Mm,
And that's why I hope that they continue to be asking questions
mm,
and also to not give up and also consider ongoing education to also help them better come up with solutions to their
mhm.
questions that they have.
Yeah.
In regards to a question to a peer, maybe we could go with who is the person that has had the most influence
That's a good one. That's a good one.
your life.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard one to pick, right?
Hmm.
Because wow.
You can go so many different ways with
So
that. I'll be sure to pose that to a guest. Yeah.
okay, wonderful.
Jorge, it's so wonderful to chat with you in this context. I know that we have these types of conversations here and there, right?
Yeah,
Along with
absolutely.
lunches we share, which we need
Yes.
to get back
Yeah.
to. It's good to just sit down over Zoom, right, and record this. So thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to say before I hit the stop record button?
No, well, just a couple of things. One,
Mm,
thank you for this opportunity. Second, like I said, this is great, Paul.
mm.
This is great what you're doing, and I hope that time flies, and that 5 years from now you're telling me, yeah, we are on episode 48, something like that. And so this is good. I mean, there's a lot of expertise in the world, and I think
Mm,
this goes back also to sort of our conversation, just what
yeah.
God does.
Mm,
So much expertise in the world. A lot of people know a lot of things,
yeah.
and we should take advantage of that. And so this is a good vehicle for that.
Yeah. I agree. And I agree that we are blessed at SBU with a community that I can continue to tap into. And so thank you for being part of this experience.
Thank you for listening to the Cross Cultural Psych Podcast with Dr. Paul Youngman Kim. We hope this content was meaningful. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to write a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, let us know what you'd like to see covered in future episodes. We hope you will join us next time.
When we first started, I remember at one of the gatherings for first year faculty where we got to meet our families,
No, I remember
how
that.
little our children were. And now
Yeah,
we're talking about them being in college or my daughters who are in middle school now, soon to be in
middle
high
school. Yeah,
school.
time
Time
flies, my
time
friend.
does
And,
fly.
indeed.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we end up remembering so many more details than they do.